Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. I'm looking forward to talking with CEO Ethan Song. Ethan, it's great to be connected with you, CEO of RareCircles. Think Community. Today we're going to be talking about turning your community into customers for life, build brand love with a membership experience that puts your customers at the center of your growth strategy. I love this topic, Ethan, and I'm glad you're here to talk about it, because I think it's really, really important. And I think sometimes people don't know exactly what those initial steps are. Before we get started, as a business coach, I love to talk to the guests that come on. I'm a business coach who works with successful people all over the globe who are successful but stuck, and work with them to get unstuck. So I always like to talk about what's your stuck as of late, and how are you able to get unstuck?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to work a lot on the marketing side of things. And one area I've been thinking a lot about is how to combine creativity with execution, and like who to hire for that. Because often you'll have people that are great at executing, that are great at project management, and some people that are, great at being creative, but with no, idea of execution. I've found it really difficult to, combine those two together. Now, is it about hiring the right person? It's about putting in place the right processes, or even the right kind of meeting setup. So that's definitely an area that I've been challenged.
Yeah, I find I think recruiting in general, I find, is just really hard in general to find the right people, and to find great people who are great at what we need them to do. What's one thing that you do to qualify the person you're talking to kind of really, maybe a question that you ask, or one thing you're looking for in the recruiting process?
I mean, I always like to have an actual challenge being given to the person that's being recruited, meaning rather than it being question based, being more, here's like a case study, or here's like a challenge I'm facing. Can you take a few hours to work on your side, and let's discuss it afterwards?
I like that.
Depending on what role they are, obviously it's very different. Obviously the whole testing, I think, came from like even the more like coding and development side, but I feel like it applies to every single job. And it actually allows you to kind of put yourself in a context where you're actually working with the person on solving a problem. And the other thing I would say validates is if they're going to do the work or not. And I would say half the people you end up talking don't even really do the work, and just kind of like freestyle it. And then in that case, obviously, their level of dedication is just not there. Some people don't want to do the work at all and just drop off. And then in that case, obviously, they're not committed to this opportunity. And I think it's fine. You know what I mean? It's all about getting the best people. And so if they're not interested, they're not the right people.
Yeah, I think it's great. Anything to qualify to anything that simulates how they think, how they work, their follow-up, their commitments. I agree. I think it's all great. Okay, good. Thanks for that. All right, let's talk about turning your community into customers for life. RareCircles.com. Kind of talk, kind of maybe broad and then zoom in.
Yeah, I mean, so to give you a bit of background about my own kind of career, I used to run a fairly large e-commerce brand called Frank and Oak, which was an early sustainable fashion D2C leader. I raised over $40 million venture capital. Took it to quite a large scale, and I came from this generation, after 2010, the last financial crisis, where a lot of it was driven by social, putting ads out there, on Facebook, on Google, and then driving traffic to your website and then converting, right? Even this idea of the funnel, the idea of conversion rates, all came from that. But what I realized over time is that a lot of that was possible because of cheap capital. And it was also because of the fact that advertising was so cheap. It just didn't make sense. And most of the brands and most of the people I spoke to, 90% of their revenue came from first-time customers. Because how is that a sustainable and viable business in the long term? And so once I exited Frank and Oak, I kind of went on and tried to basically solve this, which is, how do you build a business where the majority, when I say majority, more than 50% of your business can be recurring business and can be customers that are basically committed to your business, regardless of the scale and the size of your business. And so that's effectively what the RareCircles product, which is a membership-based product. And we use the term membership in a broader term. You don't have to necessarily pay to join any of those programs, but effectively allows you to build a membership program for your customers. So that's kind of what the product does, but that's just kind of taking you through like, what is the problem we're trying to achieve? And the problem we're trying to basically solve is effectively how to have more, recurring customers, how to have a deeper relationship with customers, how to have a less transactional relationship with your customers. And the other issue that I would say, and obviously I come from the retail space, so, a lot of my points are specific to retail, but I think it aligns with a lot of SMBs as well, which is a lot of things nowadays are very promotion driven, like sales, promotions, offers, and things like that. And unfortunately, that creates a bit of, death spiral. And like, how do you get out of that? How do you make sure you have full margins and you can be profitable? I think it plays into that as well. And so I think you said it well. I think it was one of our tagline, which is how to turn your communities into customers for life. What I've found is you have these brands that have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram or on TikTok or other social channel, and they're all fans of the brand, but they don't transact or they don't consume or they don't buy in a way that actually is sustainable for your business. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. It's so interesting. So let's just rewind everything you just said for a minute. How does somebody get, where does that start? How does somebody get started? I think that's sometimes the tough part for people. Like what are the first 2 steps, the first 3 steps that they need to take to really kind of build this relationship, right? Because I think sometimes that's where people get it. They don't even know how to build it, let alone then sustain it and then get people to, and then retain those people. So yeah. What are the first couple steps, Ethan?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with you on that, because often when I present my product, people kind of say, "Oh, is this kind of like a loyalty program?" And obviously retention is loyalty, so to a certain extent it is. But the problem with traditional loyalty is that it happens after you made your first purchase, right, or after you made your second purchase. And
right.
The reality is that your relationship with this customer happens before they made a purchase. Right? It happens the first time that they see your product or that they interact with you live or through your website. And so what we think that needs to happen is effectively taking learnings from all the features that have driven strong engagement. So like, looking at social media platforms like Facebook group and things like that, and bringing them to the forefront of the experience that you're trying to create with your customer versus having them sit on a separate channel. And then the other thing is making a relationship from the beginning less transactional. One of the issue that we're seeing right now is most people have an email capture box. They capture your email and then start hitting you up with offers. And yes, it works. It converts at like, maybe 1%, maybe 1.5% if you're lucky. But the reality is that that customer does not know you. You don't know them. There's no relationship that's being built. So we're pushing forward to effectively automate that relationship building before even the first transaction. And so effectively, if you think about it, loyalty is being built, right? Even if they're not your customer, you're already building on that loyalty. Yeah. And so we think it's important. Obviously, our tool is not there's no tool that can do all of that. But we think that for business leaders to think about that, which is I need to build loyalty and brand love from day one and not just like force people into transactions and then force them into a second transaction.
Right.
That will not necessarily, result in long-term loyalty or retention.
And what are some of those key things as they think about the loyalty, right? So they get somebody to buy something. How are they building that loyalty? Is it about customizing to the avatar? Is it about, being succinct and simple, consistent? What is it? I think, I think it's hard because today we're competing with distraction. Today we're competing with, oh, I forgot I bought that, and we're competing with just overwhelm and impulsive clients, and more so than our competitors. We're just to keep people's attention today. Yeah. And so, what are some of the things people should really be thinking about? I know it may sound like I keep on asking the same question over, but it's really not, because I think the nuances of this are things that I see people struggling with.
Yeah, so there's a few points that we've identified through our research. I think one of them is voice, and so actually giving your customer a voice in the business, and that means basically having them being able to comment things, having them being able to interact, having them be able to provide feedback on your product, on your services in a way that's transparent. I think that's extremely important for especially today's audience. The second piece I would say is reward and delight. And that plays a little bit more in the loyalty piece, which is, everyone loves to be surprised on their birthday. Everyone loves to basically, get something they didn't expect to get as a great customer. And so thinking about how you can delight and reward your customers. And the last piece, which is a little bit new and definitely came a little bit more from the internet age, but I always say it's the same thing that was happening in a small store on Main Street, from years ago, which is the sense of community. So are you able to build through your business a sense of belonging and a sense of community in your customers? If you're able to do that, then you'll build a much longer sustainable business. And you do see that at scale also. People will say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, fans of like brands like Lululemon, definitely feel like they're part of a tribe of some sorts. And so are you able to build that sense of community? And that will also, build on long-term loyalty. And as you've seen, like I'm not talking at all about like, automation or like AI email or segmentation. And the reason why is because I think those things are table stakes, but ultimately are not going to lead to true differentiation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's great. I love everything that you're talking about right now. And just to kind of recap the community, we're talking about giving your customers a voice, delight and reward, and community, the importance of community when it comes to belonging. Talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's almost a buzzword that gets thrown around a lot, community.
Yeah.
But building a community and making people feel part of something, I think is so important. So let's dive into a little bit more of that. What are the most important pieces to build for, to, and during to grow the community?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously, like my points are often like, tied to like consumer businesses, obviously selling to consumers like B2C, but I think it's also relevant to B2B as well. I think there's ways for you to foster that as well. But that said, I think, the principle comes from the fact that in today's world, like almost everything is commoditized, right? Almost all services, all products you can buy from a different brand that, yes, maybe a little bit different, but ultimately the product is not that different. And so I have this kind of thesis that your community is your differentiation. And like, there's a reason why someone buys from you and not from someone else, whether it's directly or subtly, right? Like indirectly, they're looking to join a group of purchasers or a community. And so the earlier on you can identify that, the better. So now there's two ways to do that. I think one, you could shape your product or services around a community that already exists, right? So you don't necessarily have to start a community. You can figure out, hey, there's a community of moms that are into organic food. You can find that out on like, Facebook or on Reddit or different platforms, and effectively become a member of that community and then create a product for that community. So that is one way to jumpstart your community. The other way, of course, is you start your own community, meaning like you start through content. I mean, a little bit in the way that you're doing it, even with this podcast, you start with content and you find like-minded people by putting content out there. You pull them in, you engage them in the content. It doesn't have to be a podcast. It could also be, written. It could also be a community space, let's say on Discord or Slack. But you start pulling together like, like-minded people. I also find that physical events, so like actual in real life meetups, are extremely powerful in today's world. And then you start from there. Now, obviously, strategy 1 and 2 are actually pretty close. Like, they can definitely be complementary. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing is, the way you want to build monetization, meaning like eventually you do need to sell, right? The whole point here is to create a business. Is I think that the soft sell today works a lot better than the hard sell. And so like by engaging the community, by making them part of that product and that service, you kind of get to product market fit faster and you engage them as buyers as well.
Yeah.
The last piece I would say, which I think is, really important, is basically like word of mouth and advocacy. So like getting your users, your community to actually invite more people into the community. And yes, you can do, a lot of the tactics like, rewarding like through affiliates, referrals, and like, giving people like $20, whatever, if they bring you more customers. But the reality is that the deeper the brand love, the more easily they'll do that for free. So that's the third piece. Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that we're reinventing the book. A lot of these concepts have existed, for a long time. I just think that with the internet and where we are today, there's a new way of doing it. And I think the piece that I go back to is people have almost forgotten that like relationships matter, and everything becomes very transactional, and it's a volumes game. And the reality is it's not a volumes game because there's a cost to that.
Yeah. I love it. That was great. Thank you. That was like a mini master's class, Ethan, a mini master's class. I appreciate that. Let's go into a quick speed round.
Yeah, let's do it.
A book, TED Talk, or article that's had the biggest impact on you?
Well, I mean, like, there's so many great books. I would say like Crossing the Chasm.
Jeffrey Moore. I talk about it all the time. I don't talk
More.
a lot.
And that's not the only one. I think What's the other one, Inside a Tornado, is also quite good. But basically, he's a great writer. It's very easy to read.
Yeah.
And like what I like about his book is that it's so actionable. It's not just like here's theories. Like he gives you like basically a playbook.
Yeah. It's interesting because I talk about that book a lot. I read it, I think, 25 years ago, and I often think, oh, I should read it again. But I talk about it a lot because it's always relevant, right? His whole bell curve of early adopters and the laggards and the late adopters. It's so important to look at how he views things. That's one of my all-time favorite books.
You know what I've also found with the book is that it was written for like technology companies, but I actually think it applies for almost all companies.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I actually just posted. I have this thing called Instant Insights. I kind of post these like easy, quick, digestible things, and I put book recommendations on it. And I just a couple like here. I'm just looking at Crossing the Chasm. I just did. And then The Psychology of Money was a recent one that I posted because I thought, I don't know if you read that one. It's a great
book. I read that one as well. Yeah,
great book. All right, best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
I would say it's a pretty simple one, but just to be patient and have a long-term view. I think like all entrepreneurs are want to get everything done today, but I've learned that even through my own mistakes and failures, that having a long-term mindset makes it that you're more more ready to face the challenges, and you understand that everything's a chapter to your next thing. And so that's definitely the best advice I've received, is just be patient.
Yeah, that's great. Last question, finish this sentence. One thing everybody can do to turn their community into customers for life is
invest in the community. Like give versus like looking to receive.
Tell everybody who your ideal clients are, how they connect with you, and any information to reach out.
Yeah, I would say our ideal clients are, small brands, doing between $1 to like $20 million in revenue. We have integrations for a lot of the commerce platforms like Shopify. So if you're on Shopify, you can definitely be an ideal brand. We do end up working with a lot of CPG brands. So brands that are, selling to groceries like food, beverages, even alcohol drinks. So if you're in any of those categories, we can probably help you to generate more revenue from your customers.
That's great. I really appreciate you being on the show, Ethan. Think community, I'm a business coach. I work with successful people who are stuck. I get them unstuck. And I love this podcast because I get to have guests on like Ethan who can give you nuggets to help you get unstuck. Ethan, you shared a ton of stuff today. I want to recap just a couple highlights, which is the importance of community, investing in community, give your customers a voice, delight, reward, and make people feel like they belong. And that will, what I'm using my words now, but based on what you said, and you will build ambassadors, and those ambassadors will help you grow your community. And if you provide a ton of value, it all works for you, for them, and everybody. It's great. Ethan, I appreciate it. Any final words, any thoughts?
No, I appreciate you having me, and thanks for the great work.
Thank you. Thank community. You can reach Ethan at RareCircles.com. You can reach me at JonDwoskin.com. Ethan, this was great. Thanks, man. Appreciate your time, your energy, your wisdom, and everything you shared. Thank you.
Thank you.